Do you want to know how to do better goal setting as a GP or as a practice? Well, in this episode, me and Andy are going to cover that to help you understand how better to hit those targets, hit those goals that you want to do for either yourself or your practice. So join us in this episode and let's tech enhance your primary care and learning.
Hi there, Gandhi. Hello, EGP learners. So we're just a few weeks into 2021. It's a new year, time to refresh, maybe make some goals, some resolutions, start trying to live our lives better with new habits. You made any goals or resolutions, Gandhi?
Well, I made a few, but I'll be honest, Andy, I'm despite what people may think, I'm not the best at doing what I want to do. I'm really good at getting stuff done. But when I want to do something, making sure that thing happens, okay, maybe not so good at it, shall we? So, have you got any tips for me? I'd really like some to try and make me hit my goals.
So Gandhi, I might not be very good at actually achieving anything I set, but every year I go through a really big sort of process and rigmarole of setting goals or objectives or resolutions. I've been doing it for years, and actually I really quite enjoy the process. So I'm very willing to talk through the process that I've gone through myself, and maybe there's some lessons there that people might find helpful. It's always interesting to see how different people approach this, I think, and I love watching videos of people setting goals and looking at processes online. And then also we can talk through a little bit about what we've done at my practice in terms of setting goals for the coming year, because that might be of interest to our viewers as well. So shall we do that?
Absolutely. So where do we get started then?
Okay, so do you want to hand the screen share over to me, Gandhi, and let's have a look. So the first thing, I think there's a few different ways you can approach this, loads of ways. And I think people sometimes get a little bit confused in my mind. You can set goals, or you can try and achieve new habits. And I think it's important to know which you want to be doing to achieve the objective that you have. Love this quote. And we spent some time finding out who it was attributed to, actually, because I knew the quote, but didn't know the who had said it. We first make our habits, then our habits make us. So I love that. It just highlights the importance of habits. So that was by Dryden in 1899. You looked this guy up, Gandhi. Who was he?
So it was actually published in 1899, but he was the first poet laureate. So John Dryden, I think tail end of the 1600s is when he was around. And yeah, so he apparently did some amazing stuff, which both of us are slightly embarrassed to not know about, but okay. But yeah, it's an interesting quote, isn't it? And definitely agree that habits, and I'd probably extend that into culture as well. So if we're looking at a practice perspective, trying to change culture is often the more difficult task, and it's something that can't be done at a flick of a switch, unless you have some major pandemic level stuff happen, I guess. But even then, it's not easy, is it? So yeah, difficult, isn't it?
No, absolutely. And I think sometimes people set. So if you take something like weight loss, that's going to be a big goal for lots of our patients, lots of us individually, potentially, or to improve health. And I think what you really need to achieve that is, like you say, a culture change or a habit change. Really, you need to be doing something different. And sometimes people might set that as a goal. I need to be this weight by the end of the year, but actually, you don't really need to set a goal. What you need to set is a habit, or you need to make a proper permanent behavior change and form a new habit. So it's really about how you do that. They say you have to do something consecutively for 30 days, I think, Gandhi, to form a new habit. I've heard that in lots of places.
So 10 days to break the existing habit, another 10 days to try and make it more part of your routine, and then the last 10 days is to solidify it. It's kind of nice that it fits into that whole month thing, which is why all these kind of like challenge months and the things that you see typically are a month-long thing, change your weight in 28 days or 30 days or whatever, because it kind of fits with that model of that's how long it takes to make something into an actual new habit.
No, absolutely. So, right. So I'll talk through what I'm trying to do differently this year, and people might find it helpful, they might not, but it's certainly interesting, I think, to see how different people approach it. So I'm just clicking on my other screen so I can actually advance it. So these are some photos from my whiteboard this morning of my approach to sort of goal setting and achieving new things in 2021. And I think the first thing to talk about is the most important thing, I think, is actually to reflect, first of all, and think about where you are, maybe look back over the last year, think about where you think you've had success, where you think you could have done better. But more importantly, to think about where your values are and where you want to be in terms of some of the bigger pictures in life. So this, what you're seeing here is something new that I'm doing this year. Previously, I've been very goal or habit orientated in terms of, oh, I must go for a jog 4 out of 7 days a week, and tick that off, and sort of be very specific about things. But I picked up this idea from a friend, actually, and this is a slider board. So actually, this is where I've identified some things which I think are either really key habits, like this trying to journal on a daily basis, but also just kind of value-based statements that I just want to judge myself against periodically, at least one a week. And I've got some little magnets there that I'm going to move around as sliders as I just sort of grade myself. And I think actually setting up that process of just reflecting on where you're at on a periodic basis, I think will be really helpful. And my friend had some good things to say about it. The interesting thing here is before doing this, I think I got a little bit fixated on the idea that the only way you can achieve something is by setting a SMART goal, and that anything else is not the right way to do it, because I think that's drilled into us a little bit as we go through our education process. I remember it from school and medical school. But actually on some of those bigger things, about work-life balance, it's not as easy as that. And sometimes it's actually a bigger picture question in terms of where do I feel that is? And that's the reflection that you need to be making. And then obviously that does translate into behaviors and actions. But I'm really keen to try this sort of slider thing. So I want to journal twice a day. I want to try new things, because 2020 felt like being stuck in a rut. Like many people involved in general practice and primary care networks, work-life balance went out the window a little bit. So I want to try and reflect more on that. An interesting thing I picked up this year, Gandhi, on productivity was, and I don't know, and I think you're a really good example of this, actually. Sometimes when we feel like we're not able to apply ourselves to our tasks and get things done in a productive fashion in terms of deliver a good amount of work within a certain set of time, I think we think, oh, I'm too busy, I need to do less. But the advice I heard was actually sometimes you need to do more to be more productive, because actually it sets limitations in terms of what you're able to do in a certain amount of time. It means that you have more of those self-imposed deadlines. So, for example, if I've got the weekend free just to draft this podcast and that's all I've got to do, Parkinson's law, it'll probably take all weekend. But if I've made a commitment to see a friend, can't really do these things at the moment, but see a friend, maybe online, do something else, I'll actually get things done quicker. I'll get more done, and I'll be doing more active relaxation. So being less busy isn't always the objective in terms of achieving balance. What do you think, Gandhi? You keep yourself busy. Is that what you're doing?
I think I keep myself busy. It's also, I've got that annoying habit of always having something shiny that attracts my attention and wants me to do something, and that's my bigger challenge. People often comment, how do you get all this stuff done? And it's I am productive in a lot of ways. I'm pretty quick at getting most things done when I need to get them done. But like you say, I need that pressure. But I'm also love looking at the new shiny next kind of thing, and that can easily make me want to do something more. And then that's the problem for me. So I'm awful at the completer finisher of the things that I want to do. I'm really good at getting everything else for other stuff I have to do, but the stuff I want to do, I'm much better at putting that to the back, which I need to focus on sometimes, I think, a bit more, because if I did that, I'd probably find life is a bit easier, which is why I'm keen to know how that we can try and change some of that goal setting.
Yeah. well, this isn't the entirety of what I'm of how I'm structuring my goals and productivity this year. But this is sort of, this represents the headline sort of values level. These are things which I think I value, like balance, like health in terms of exercise, eating well, and sleeping, and consuming good quality information. You see, reading and learning, but brackets quality information. So I'm going to try and pay more attention to my information diet, and hopefully watch less of Nailed It on Netflix. Anybody seen that? Incredibly addictive. It's a baking show, but it is complete trash. So I need to watch less Nailed It. So hopefully, so that was something new for me, just these sliders to grade your values against. So people might find that interesting. Another new idea this year that I've come across is this idea of composite goals. So what's a composite goal? So it's a goal where if you achieve it, you will, if selected carefully, you will actually, in achieving that goal, be achieving all sorts of many other goals and hopefully developing all sorts of helpful habits. So, for example, I made quite a specific composite goal, not completely smart, given I'm not quite sure where we'll be at in terms of COVID, in terms of ability to go to 10K races and things like that. But I want to improve my times running 10 kilometers. And in achieving that, the aim is that I will be going for a run regularly. I'll probably find that I'm looking at my nutrition and my sleep, and I'm doing all sorts of other helpful things in the pursuit of that more specific composite goal. So I'd really encourage people to set some, and I'll be improving the balance in my life and all sorts of things. So I really encourage people to set some composite goals and to be a bit creative with that. So run 10Ks. The other thing I want to do is, so I want to read more. I thought, how do I make myself read more? And I've just decided to come at this from a different angle, Gandhi. And I've decided, actually, I'm going to just buy more books and be deliberate about what I buy. And hopefully as a byproduct, I feel obliged to read them or get excited about the books that I've selected. So I'm going to try and buy a book every 2 weeks to contribute to my personal library. Physical books, not on the Kindle or an app. And I'm going to hopefully read them. And actually, it's been working out so far in the first few weeks. Yeah, where do you read many books, Gandhi?
So I've got back into reading physical books, and actually it's interesting you talk about this. So one of the things I was really bad at doing lately is, so I've had a few problems with my ankles and my Achilles tendons. So I've been really bad at doing my physio exercises, but one of the things I figured is I need to find a way for me to do this. So I started reading physical books more, and every time I get my book out before I go to bed, then I go do my exercises at the same time. And I found that it's worked by not using my phone to read, which is what I would normally do. I now know I have to go get my book. So when I've got my book, okay, now I need to go do my exercises, and I do them both at the same time. And I've been a lot better at doing it. Let's put it that way. So yeah, and having that book next to my bed, so it's not my phone, because I hate having my phone next to my bedside. Otherwise, like many people, I can end up going down the rabbit hole. Whereas having a book there, actually, it's really worked for me.
Yeah, I think books are really good. Actually, I think they're making a bit of a comeback. It's an anti-distraction device. It doesn't allow you to browse the internet or do other things. It's deliberately designed with the omission of distracting functions, which I think is a great feature these days. Yeah, so I want to try and work on. So vlog is really sort of the pod blast and so forth, and I just try and create a little bit of written blog content myself. So that's an objective for this year. And then I want to set something about trying new things, because again, but I'm not quite sure, to be confirmed, TBC, I'm not quite sure what that objective looks like yet. So that's my composite goals. So I don't think you need to set them for every aspect of your life, but certainly setting a few to help develop some good habits around physical health and informational health, which I think is a new term that maybe I've coined now, but I think it's really, really important. So I'm trying to do that. So that's composite goals. And then the final thing, I was thinking about, where do I want to focus my energy in the coming year? Just sitting back, reflecting what's important to me going forwards, because we don't always actually divide our time and our energy in that way. When we actually look at, I've not done an audit to look at how I've been dividing my time, but we don't always actually behave according to our values or what we value. So I've developed so this. I wanted to do it as 4 quadrants, but then it ended up as 2 4s. So it's my 4x4 focus quads. And I don't think you can have too many in this. I was trying to limit myself to 4, and I've ended up with 8. And actually, on the other part of the whiteboard, this is the bit that's bigger, and I can kind of put individual tasks and sort of work at my day-to-day, week-to-week sort of planning, strategically getting tasks done bit. So this is something that's recreated larger for actual use, but this is just the kind of summary version. And I thought, actually, what's important to me? So I should be balanced. So I should have equal space to career and work, and then things relating more to myself. And like Gandhi, wear a few hats. So it's worth acknowledging those and planning life accordingly. I have my practice where I'm a partner. Primary care network work. I'm involved with the local GP federation, and that's important. And then there's EGP learning and hopefully maybe a little bit more blog writing myself, which is something that I've really enjoyed over the last few years. And I need to make sure that I dedicate the right amount of time and attention and energy to it. And then on the other side, probably not spent as much time as I should have done on self last year. So I want to look at health, including financial health. I just put that in there because I think financial health is important, but I didn't want to make a whole new block for it because it's not that important to me at the moment. Self, so that's just sort of personal development outside of career. Need to make time for my interests: board game, video games, science fiction, football, sport. Got to make space for those. And then essential activities. So I might have to paint a fence at some point, things like that. So there needs to be space for that. But that's not personal development, and it's nothing to do with my career. So I need space to plan those things on my whiteboard. So that's my focus quad. So that's really my personal approach to goal setting. And it's actually quite different to what I've done in previous years. What do you think about those things, Gandhi?
Yeah, I think it's a great way of sectioning things off so you can see how you're dedicating time to various different aspects and priorities in your life. And I like the fact that you've given equal balance to work and life. And, I guess some people see it different ways. But I think it's important to recognize that there are other things in your life that you need to be focused on and trying to do that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm going to ask you at the end what your specific goals are, Gandhi. You need to mull those over in your mind, or at least what I said. You can set a composite goal for yourself by the end of this episode. So shall we move on? So shall we talk about practice goal setting?
Yeah, so we've talked obviously a lot about personal goal setting, but one of the key areas we wanted to also discuss is how you can apply this to the practice level work. And we talked earlier how a lot of this is culture change, and absolutely change management and culture change is part of that. But you've come up with an interesting way of trying to do this, haven't you, Andy?
Yeah, so I think I'll talk through what we're doing at my practice this year, and just to give some acknowledgement. So the other partners, Ben Morehouse and Amita Diolka, have been really, really involved in the development of the objectives going forwards, and our manager and other members of staff. And Ben has done the visuals for this, drawing on some artwork and graphics I've previously done. But so here we go. So I'll leave that up on the screen for people to look at while we talk. But there are all sorts of ways that practices and organizations can approach goal setting, all sorts of ways. But it feels like we're doing a better job this year than we have done in the past. And the process we've gone through is, first of all, we've reflected. It's been, as it was personally, a really long, difficult, hard year. So in some ways it was easier to reflect this year than in previous years. Everybody was more ready to reflect. So we need to think about what's important to the practice. But we also need to be balanced and make sure that we are giving all the different areas that are relevant to practice performance and growth and development and doing our job some space. So we've sort of identified some areas. So growth is it's just a particular issue for our practice. We want to grow and make better use of the space that we have, because we're probably a little bit small for the physical space that we have. available to us. But then other things that are really important to us and our patients, having listened to them previously, not this year, but previously in patient participation groups, are just the patient experience is really important. Access always comes through, and that cuts through a few different stakeholders, really. CQC are always interested in access. Actually, when the patients have good access, it's a lot easier on the staff, from reception staff right the way through to our clinical staff.
Yeah.
So that cuts across a few of the stakeholders. We're in the business of treating and preventing illness, so we thought it was important to acknowledge that. And quality is important to us, and quality is important to NHS England, and quality is important to CQC, and quality is important to our patients. It's important to everybody. So it's important to set some objectives in that area. And we already performance manage ourselves against much more than this. There are all sorts of performance dashboards, and there's the QOF dashboard. But in terms of setting some headline objectives, we thought if we set some specific things, and there's a bit of the composite goal thinking going on here as well, in terms of some of the things that we've selected. If we achieve some of these, we'll probably be doing well in those other areas as well, if we achieve them. So we identified the areas, and then we thought about, okay, what? And when selecting specific goals, I think this is where it does help to be smart. If you're as an organization, if you're measuring your performance against certain, so you can measure your performance against metrics and know where you are. The team can know where you are, and they can have confidence in the mechanism of knowing where you are. That's all really important. So it's important to set goals, I think, that are relevant, obviously. They have to be achievable. You've got to be able to do it, and the team need to believe that you can do it in order to potentially get there. Hopefully we've selected goals that have synergy with other goals. So what I mean by synergy is we don't want to make things too difficult for ourselves. So actually improving the friends and family test will probably also improve. So improving access, for example, or reducing inbound calls should also improve our scores on friends and family test. And, so we can stack these up and have some synergy in terms of the goals. And very important is ease of reporting. So you don't want to set yourself a really big task of doing a complex audit every month to see how you're doing in terms of one of your objectives. If you can select things which are really easy, one button reporting from system one, or that the data is being collected already for another reporting process, then that's really, really helpful. So these are what we came up with. Gandhi, I'm going to ask you a question. So when you're goal setting, so that the gold standard, one would think would be to think, right, all of our goals need to be sort of set and agreed by everybody. Engagement is important because that's how staff get ownership of goals. And that is important. But then on the other hand, there's something about the senior management team potentially being best placed and having the best perspective on what is important to all the stakeholders, and not having a sort of specific interest about, we must improve staff pay, and that's like the overriding objective or things like that. They don't have that. They have a more general view of what would be good for the organization, and a more strategic view. How do you achieve that balance at your practice, Gandhi? When you're thinking about what to do, is it all senior management team driven, or do you have a really high level of engagement, or how do you strike that balance?
I think the balance needs to be for the decision you're trying to make, isn't it? So for the really big practice level stuff that's going to have an impact on everybody, we will absolutely go to the entire practice and say, look, this is what we're thinking. We need to look at how we can make this better. How do we do this, and get that information from as many places as possible? When it's not that, practice shaking kind of decision, It's then trying to look at who is this going to impact and having them all involved. So it may be around, prescriptions. Well, prescriptions doesn't just relate to the GPs that are prescribing the medications. It also relates to obviously the reception teams that are processing them with the staff. It relates to the admin in the back. It relates to the pharmacies, local pharmacies, as well as the pharmacists in practice, and trying to get them involved as well. So it's trying to understand who it's going to have an impact on and having them all involved at that point. So we try and do that. I don't think we're probably the best at it every single time. But if you're looking for a way to try and align it as much as possible to be both responsive and effective and engaging, I kind of like Warren Buffett's method. So he always says that you should have, 3 goals for what you want to achieve in life or work or whatever it is. And everything else you do should align to those 3 goals. And if they don't, then why are you doing it? And I think that's a great way to try and, move things forward, because then at least you know that if you're not aligned to those 3 goals of what you need to do, then you're kind of doing something you don't necessarily want to do. And unfortunately, I completely understand that in general practice, we often do many things that we have to do, but we don't want to do. But it just gives a bit more credence to actually why that's useful or not to you as a practice or as an individual.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of wisdom there, Gandhi. So I'm gonna dive down to a really practical level here. So
okay, go for it.
From experience of doing this sort of exercise a number of times in the past, what generally doesn't work, and I think you're right. You've got to engage, and you've got to engage on the right decisions. But what generally doesn't work is sort of having a completely open book or a completely blank page and going to the staff at a staff meeting saying, right, we need some objectives for this year. What are people's ideas? Let's try and incorporate a little bit of everybody's ideas into this and make it work. On a practical level, that generally doesn't deliver many suggestions, and it doesn't deliver strategic suggestions. So what we've done this year is really the senior management team, and that is quite inclusive because there's nurse involvement, GP involvement, management involvement. So those people do represent their teams. Have come up with a suggestion in terms of the headline targets, in terms of what we think will be good for the organization, but also good for the staff, because we've got hopefully our values and culture in the right place in terms of the goals we're setting for the organization. And obviously it's all about the patients at the end of the day. But we've then engaged on that with some flexibility about changing the objectives, about changing the thresholds, and about incorporating some that we might not have thought of that are important to the staff. So we've gone through that sort of process, and that seems to have worked quite well, actually. We've got quite good buy-in for the objectives this year. So on a practical level, that's what we've done, and that's something that I think generally works well in organizations. So that was interesting. I've got another question for you, Gandhi, and this might be a bit personal, actually. Do you pay a staff bonus at your practice?
Yeah, we try to. I can't remember what it was this year before you asked me that question.
No, and amounts are important sometimes. It's principles, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So we thought about it incentivizing this year in terms of if we meet the minimum ask or the stretch ask, then we're tying that into we're tying personal appraisals into meeting these objectives and other practice objectives. And then as a whole, if the organization meets these objectives, then we will pay a bonus. And the actual percentage salary, that'll depend on business performance at the time, but we're sort of committed to paying a bonus, as we have done this year. It's been a very difficult year, so we felt that we needed to reward staff. Staff have really stepped up. We felt that we needed to reward their dedication. And again, I'm going to just talk about how you structure a bonus, actually, because we did something a bit different this year, and I thought it was a really good idea. So I thought I'd share it. And this came from Ben, our nurse prescribing partner at the practice. And hopefully I'll explain this right. But rather than just pay a proportion of sort of people's salary as a bonus, as you might normally do, or give a flat amount to everybody across the practice, we did something different, because those two approaches are fraught with some problems. The highest paid staff aren't necessarily the ones that have sort of sacrificed the most to achieve objectives that year. And also some people work part-time, as well, and aren't there as much as other people. So, how do you account for that? And that's not very well accounted for in a sort of flat fee bonus structure. So what we did was look at what the total wage bill across all of the staff were. And then we looked at the total staff hours worked by all of the staff and divided the former by the latter. So we got a sort of average pay per hour for our whole staff. And then we applied our percentage sort of bonus for that in terms of annual salary. And then we paid out that figure for each hour worked by each individual per week at the practice. And that had some really nice effects, actually. So everybody got something which felt meaningful. But actually what it meant was some of our part-time GPs still got a meaningful bonus. But actually they got less significantly than some of our, say, full-time receptionists, for example, who, because they worked more of those hours, got more. And that felt really nice, actually, particularly this year, when it's been a really difficult year and everybody's made sacrifices, and everyone felt valued. So I just thought I'd share that, because that was a really interesting way of calculating a bonus that I'd not come across before. Thanks.
It's a different way of doing it. I've not heard of that particular method, and it does sound kind of cool, actually.
It's good. It's definitely worth looking at for people out there. So it's put to incentivize, potentially, where you put an objective structure in place. And then the final thing is, how do you track it over time? So our intention is to just print a new copy of this every month with, how are we doing relative to the target each month, and just stick it up across the wall, going across the wall throughout the year. So there'll be a lot of them up there by the end of the year, and we can just sort of track our progress over time. And hopefully that'll allow the staff to remain invested in it and see how they're doing going towards maybe having a bonus or not. Which
I must admit, I do like the visual accountability of that. So the regular point of here's what we've done, but also the retrospective view and the fact that it's being stuck physically somewhere. I like that concept of accountability, that you're drilling into that view of doing it.
Yeah, so we'll see how it goes, and it might be maybe we can bring this back at the end of the year if I'm comfortable with how the practice is done on some of these metrics, and see. So we'll have a look at that. But so hopefully, just looking at the personal goal setting concepts that we talked about today, and then looking at some of the practical concepts and practical considerations about setting goals in practice, and just having that conversation has been helpful for those people listening and watching today. And I'd be really interested to know how other people set their personal goals, and try and make sure they achieve them, and how people set their practice goals as well, because this is something that I love reading about and trying to put things in place, but constantly struggle to actually get as much traction with it as I would hope. So really love to know what people are doing themselves out there.
Absolutely. And what I say to any of our GP leaders looking or listening at this particular episode is, if you've got some stuff that you want to share with us, feel free to do so. So tag us on Twitter. So both myself and Andy are both on Twitter. I'm at Dr. Gandalf 52. Andy, you're DRAW Foster, or as I like to call it, Draw Foster.
Draw Foster. Dr. A.W. Foster. Draw Foster on Twitter.
And if not, stick it in the comments down below on the YouTube channel and stuff. Definitely leave us a like, because we appreciate that. And also, if you want, in this show notes, we're going to put a kind of blank version of Andy's template that you saw, that I'm just going to bring back on screen. So if you did want to kind of borrow that, but obviously it'll be a cleaned out version, so you can just stick in your own practice information and stuff and criteria, and we'll provide that for you as well in this show notes. So definitely have a look at that, download it, and share it with people and see what you think, and chuck in what you're thinking in terms of how you might have a look at goal setting, and is there stuff that, or ways that you found that work better for you. And actually, Andy, I might hold you to bringing that back at the end of the year, whether you like it or not, to see how well it went.
We can do that.
That itself is a lesson to be learned, isn't it?
If things are, well, that's ultimate accountability, isn't it? And if we've not, both on personal and parkside objectives, that would be a really fun episode to do, actually. And if anything's too personal, I mean, I can just blank out those bits.
Sure thing.
So that's good.
Cool. And hopefully you found that useful, everyone. As always, if you've got any comments, questions, let us know. Definitely subscribe. Give us a like. We appreciate it if you do that. It lets us know we're doing some cool content. And as always, EGP Learning is here to help save you and your patients time by taking hands in your primary care and learning. And we'll catch you in the next episode.